gonna just take a couple shields off real quick first. To do is just start draining it. It doesn't technically have an air gap. The main air line is this, which has evidently been melted. We can't all have perfect cars, but this is the fitting for the line that goes to the master cylinder. So this is where your master and slave function is going to come from. And grab this. Usually that is a copper crush washer, so somebody has been in here, but that can be draining while we're doing the other stuff. Sometimes it's not worth cleaning them. Okay, so and I just start loosening everything up. You can take most of this stuff off before you have to actually start moving everything. Connectors, all of these clips, I like to pull them off of the harness because they're reusable for other things, other projects and things. You don't have to use them for this. So I like to just cut the zip tie off. This one should just, sometimes it'll just pop out, but yeah. It's like you can still reuse this. In fact, when I do mine, I'll stick it on the side and then run another zip tie through it. So these are reusable, little reusable Christmas tree things. So I like to keep all these. Oh, that's disintegrated. Just pulling the ground strap off for the Artronic harness. Usually leave these on there. This is the main power wire for the Artronic pump. That's the thing that you hear whining every time you open the driver door, or just randomly, it's just priming that pump. Push the connector towards you, pull the lock, slide it back. Igor always panics because he's like, how do you know when you can just yank on something and when you can't? And I'm like, try it. Break one first and then see. Sometimes it's yank, sometimes there's a screw you can't see. Usually on Lamborghinis, it's a screw you can't see that you have to yank. There's definitely a certain fun, rewarding element to this stuff though, because like you're taking all this like complicated mess of stuff out. Yeah, this is not supposed to be covered in RTV. Like they don't seal this with RTV from the factory in the first place. Whatever. All right, there's another bracket somewhere I'm missing, but we'll do this one first. Sometimes it doesn't. I don't think it's gonna leak much. This is the main line connection that connects the actuator assembly to the pump assembly. So this would be the high pressure line. You don't ever want to take this line off if you've heard that thing prime in the last 24 hours. If you start to take it off and this thing's going to be an issue, you'll notice it pretty quickly because it'll start like pushing fluid out of this. See how there's nothing is leaking out right now? It's not like shooting fluid out at us. Long by now it would have been shooting tons. It's just like basically seeping out. It won't let you get this far. See how it's just like kind of dripping out? That's what we want it to do. I'll move it in a second. I'm just gonna scoot this line over, scoot it out of the way. Okay, so that's just there to keep that from dumping out tons of stuff. And then we're gonna pull this loose. Sometimes it's easier than others. I try to do this in a way that it doesn't destroy the little rubber part right here because those can be used other places on the car, but sometimes it really won't let you. So I'm trying to keep this pinned down while I move that up. And when it shoots up, it often just sprays you. Yeah, there we go. All right, oh, one more thing. So this is that clutch line that runs to the bottom. Everything on this car is super tight. All right, I've never had one be this tight before, but the last thing you want to do when you have a tight line like that is to force it, then you'll get stuck. So it's a five-sided wrench so that you can slip over it. It prevents it from stripping the edges of the bolt, essentially. Let that go on. Flat part. The angle's wrong for this. That's my problem. It's either too far one way or too far the other. Like that's technically it right there, but then I can't turn it. So I'm gonna, since this one's giving me trouble, I'm just gonna do it a little bit differently. I'm gonna pull the whole line out with it. I've never had to do this before, but I guess it's better to have issues when you're filming than not, so other people can see what you're dealing with. This is just a 10 mil that holds that line on. So now when I pull that actuator off, I can pull the whole line with it. Now all we have left is this one little triple square under here, which is a pain in the butt. Yeah, I think somebody over tightened this thing. Yeah, see how it's galled on the edge there? They put it way too tight, but whatever. That's the problem of the past. This is out. Stick it off to the side. That is the actuator assembly. And lest we drop too much junk down in there, I'm gonna put a little cover on this that I crudely whittled out of aluminum. So we need to get that out. I'll try these very cheap pliers. These are the best ones for getting out like round stuff without destroying it. Perfect. I'm not gonna put it in just yet because that screw is holding it down, so we'll just set it here with these other things that we'll be putting back on. All right, we're done with this. Next part's a little bit tedious because of the location of some of these bolts. It's kind of hard to get an adequate sized tool in here. So there's 3 of these. There's one on top to drain this until you get that actuator off, because it makes a big old mess if you don't, because of the suction. It keeps trying to suck back in because it's creating a vacuum as it's draining. So once you get the top of this thing open to where it's not creating that vacuum, it drains a lot more smoothly. You'll see what I mean. Oh, well that wasn't nice, but it's a messy job, man. Somebody's got to do it. That's normal wear. You want no big chunks, just very fine particles, and that looks great. Something tells me that's not 48,000 miles of wear. Usually I see more than this with less miles. And we know somebody's been in here, so it's probably been changed and cleaned before. I imagine they were probably having some electronic issues with it at some point, because that whole assembly has been reinstalled. Like I said, it doesn't usually have all that RTV all over it. And also the bolts are never as tight as they were on this thing. So we want to clean off all that metallic. I'm not going to put this back in yet. I'm actually going to leave it out until we're about to put it back together, and I'll explain why when we get inside. But basically it's because it continues to give the fluid a place to keep the faces of the surfaces clean for when I'm about to put everything back together, so I don't have to keep chasing it over and over again, because it just keeps fluid from the back of the transmission just keeps rolling its way down. All right, so I typically, when I'm doing this, because this fluid, just grab an old grocery bag. I keep stock of them, and I will, all of these like paper towels and rags, and this stuff is called pig mat. It's amazing. If you haven't discovered pig mat, now you have. It's the thing in your life that you never knew was missing. I know you thought it was romance, but it wasn't. It was, pig mat's awesome, and you'll see why too, because I'm gonna use it for this whole thing. But the reason I bring up the grocery bag deal is because when you do this job, it's gonna make your whole garage stink up. And when you're done with the job, you're basically eliminating everything that's causing the smell, so that you can get it back to smelling normal faster. If I threw it in my, it depends on your trash can setup, I guess, but if I threw it in my big trash can, it would just smell like it until I took the trash out. This way I don't have to waste a, 40-gallon trash bag to throw this stuff out. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna stick that there. Okay, now, the reason I did that first is because now I'm gonna take a 22 millimeter and I'm gonna take these bad boys off. Actually, I'm gonna take the filter out first. Usually I start by taking the filter out right after I drain it. So I'm gonna try to, by hand, twist it to the side like that. And I'm just gonna wiggle it behind there a little bit, press it out. You don't wanna gall the metal. You're just trying to get a way to start prying that out, and then you can rotate it back down, pull it out more. We ought to get a lovely influx of fluid. Like I said, messy job. Yep. This looks pretty good. Just tiny little pieces. You can see a few tiny pieces. I've never seen a transmission that didn't have at least some pieces. And I think even when a transmission is brand new, if you think about like how precise the tiny Synchro gears, gear teeth and stuff are, like you're gonna be getting some breakage of metal. It's never gonna be perfect. So you got this, and you've got the magnet on the drain bolt to keep your transmission from just slinging metal all through it. This filter actually comes right before the pump. There's a pump inside that pumps fluid around, and it pumps it through these cooler lines. Funny enough, the GTs don't have cooler lines. It just has a single tube that goes from here to here. It just wraps around the back. Another one of the funny things they deleted on the GT in the name of weight savings. If it had been the other way around, they would have put the cooler on the GT in the name of better track performance. But they were like, hey, we don't need this. We over-engineered it. We'll keep it on all the street cars, but the track car doesn't need a transmission cooler. Riddle me that. Out of the way, I can take these other 2 bolts out of this pump assembly a lot more easily. And I'm actually gonna use a long 10mm triple square. And the cool thing about this guy, you can just put a ratcheting wrench on it, back on it, accumulator underneath the pump. This is the last one. And after we're done dumping all these fluids in, we'll actually reuse this fluid in the transmission to ruin it. Just kidding, obviously it's junk. This thing will drain for ages because the height of the drain hole is higher, and so you can just keep doing this and just keep getting more fluid out of it. At some point you just have to say, screw it, enough is enough. I give up. I mean, I store all these in big bins now, but if you're storing this stuff on a shelf or scooting it around or whatever, you don't want it leaking all over your stuff. All right, this is the last little bolt that wouldn't come out. I had to put a glove on for this part. That is black. Always loved the black oil. But since we're also doing a clutch job, it makes more sense to just take the reservoir out right now, get it out of our way, even though that we're not directly doing that. We're gonna do the conversion part of the transmission first. But in order to take all this stuff out, obviously it has to be drained, and there's a little over 9 quarts of oil in this thing to drain out, so. But it looks good. It doesn't look like a milkshake like that Black Mercy that I drained recently. All right, so while that's draining, we can do some other preemptive stuff. There are bolts that come off to take this rear section off. And one of the nuts is hard to access, which is why I usually take these bolts out and then elevate it. I just stick a 1x2 under here to raise it up, and then you can get access from underneath to that one nut that's right back here. And it's tough to get a 13 on it. You want to have like as short of a 13 as you can. I've never had serious issues getting them off, but they are generally pretty tight, and I try to start with that one first so that there's the least amount of tension on it possible. I'm just gonna stick this in here for now. Quit leaking on me. Technically I could go ahead and put the thing back on there, but I'm not gonna. Your drain pan before you start putting a bolt back in, because if you drop the bolt and it goes in the drain pan, it's annoying. So do as I say, not as I do. All right, so since we're gonna do a full oil change, I'm not gonna torque this down yet. I'll go through at the end and torque down every single bolt for the oil change. So now we've got 2 back here. So we gotta take the oil lines off. So there's 2 bolts back here. There's an upper oil drain line and a lower oil drain line. The hardest one to get is this one back here. Usually I put an extension on it, thusly. It's not bad. Once you get it loose, you can just twist it out without question. I usually just stick a little flathead in there and try to separate it like you would splitting the panel. Doesn't always work so easily, but the top one will leak some, but not. And this is primarily coming out of the line, the chassis line, not the reservoir. We'll do the same thing up here, but we're actually just gonna stick this underneath it to help prevent it from making a mess. And actually, I am gonna just start this just to make it shut up, because it will not stop dripping on me. It won't leave me alone. This guy. All right, got a tiny little drip out of there, nothing big. And then there is a connector on the back that you need to remove. Push in, pull the lock, same story. This is your oil level and temperature sensor. So there's that, and then there's also a little clip that it's held onto. Now I would leave your drain container down below, because when you go to pull this out, you need to tilt it forward, which is going to drain more out, and you want to do this and make the least mess possible. There's only one way to get it out. You can try it every other way if you want. Oh yeah, so there's the sensor, and this is where it clips into right here. So when you're going to put it back, you can see there's the clip for it, and then here's the sensor. So it clips in here, it's just a little Christmas tree. Usually it just pops out. I can pull it out with my fingers. If it's too tight, you can always try to pry it with a flathead. And then here's the sensor that it plugs into. These go bad a lot on these cars. I've replaced those more than any other single sensor type component on these cars. They get hot, they see oil, they're gonna have issues. So I like to show people how to do those, because it's gonna be something that most people will have to do at least at some point. They just go bad. So the facelift cars are a different part number, so be aware if you have a facelift car and you go to do it. I've seen a lot of people order them. It's a completely different part, and it requires draining the oil in order to replace it, because it's on the bottom of the reservoir. These, you don't have to drain the oil out at all, because the oil sits below this level right here. This has a big long arm that sticks like this far down in here. So you don't have to go crazy draining oil out or anything to replace it. You can just replace it with the full oil in there. No big deal. All right, I'm ready to take the transmission apart. How about you? Let's start with these links. All right, so Audi likes to ship these units incomplete. It's missing quite a few things. You'll notice it's missing the bolt, it's missing the shaft, it's missing the link. Really nice. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna build these out to where they can go ahead and be installed on the car. So I like to put just a little bit of grease inside here. Technically it doesn't need it, but since these are roller bearings, it'll just give it something to kind of self-lubricate the bearings over time. I'm really not putting that much in here, and most of this will squeeze out when I put the shaft through anyway. But when they used to ship them complete, they were shipping these with grease inside here, and so I just am copying what the person that used to work for Audi / Lamborghini knew before. Evidently now the people that work there know better. Either technology changed or somebody's not doing their job right. Probably both. But all right, so these are just the bolts for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The shift selector, I'm just pulling them out so I can keep everything together, because when I go to assemble it, it'll be this whole part. All right, so we want this guy in here. See, most of that just squished out, so. All right, that's one. And then I've got all these original little zip tie clips that hold these on, so I'm just gonna put one on there to secure it, keep it from sliding off, keep the assembly together. And we'll take that off when we put it on the car, obviously. All right, this one, so I like to pre-press these because sometimes there's a little bit of burr of aluminum, and then you don't want to be fighting that when you're assembling this like I'm doing right now. All right, we're gonna do one spacer, and then we're gonna stick this in to this ball joint, this bearing. Whoops, what's going on? Was it rose joint? Is that what that's called? Spherical bearing. It's like 100 names for it. All right, so we got the bottom in, or the top in, and then we just got to drop one of these guys. I'll pull this out a little bit. All right, now that pushes through, and then I'm going to use one of these washers just to space out the clip. And then the clip, this is an E-clip. I don't know where I'll just grab my needle nose over here. Throw an E-clip on there. Boom, bing, bang, boom. Gotta love it. That feels good. All right, now these are going to be used for the other end of these. So I'll just put everything in one bag that's going to be used for that, and we'll assemble this on the car. Technically it could be assembled on the selector right now, but that would be more annoying than helpful. So all right, we're gonna go put this in our bin, and we'll start on the fun stuff. I have broken many Allens doing this, so don't hate on this process because it might happen. So basically what I'm gonna do is just torch the Allen bolt on this. I'm gonna do it for 1 minute straight. That ought to be enough time. Heat it up, but these have Loctite on them, and most of them have been sitting for a long time. You can see the rust on this shaft that's developed just from it sitting in storage. So it helps to just heat it up. And I've had some of these that even after I heat it up, it's a huge pain to get the Allen out. If you try to use like an Allen socket, like a socket with an Allen head on it, you're gonna snap it off. It's a number 4 Allen. Every 4 mil Allen that I've tried to use on this broke. Okay, so we'll cut that for now. And then easiest way is just put your Allen in there. See, it just twists the Allen. You might need to do it cook it a little bit longer. There it goes. Yeah, it's tight. Just let that sit there and cool off a little bit. Now we'll move to this one. This one has 2 Allens on it, so we gotta cook them both. I usually do the first one, loosen it up, and then the second one only needs like maybe half as much time. These ones tend to be newer. I think I tried one recently and it came loose without any heat. It just depends on if they're pulling from old stock or new stock. I think these are usually easier than the other one. Yeah, there we go. You can see that Loctite on there. These have to shift in order to slide in on the transmission. These are in the way, they're blocking what the other forks need to go in order for this to go on the transmission. So these have to be loosened up and removed, or else you won't be able to get them on the transmission at all. Okay, lovely. See, the end of the bar is kind of finished poorly. Not the best finish. Looks like someone took a angle grinder to it almost. All right, this is actually still very hot. All right, so got it cut. I mean, dude, does that look any worse than the one that I cut off? I mean, truly, it looks exactly the same, like someone did it with an angle grinder. So the reason I have to cut that shorter is because there's a back out stopper. This right here is the reverse gear selector. So this, the reverse gear Synchro, the fork attaches to this shaft, and it's inside the rear housing, which I'll point it out when we take it apart. We're gonna take it apart in just a second, but it's in the rear housing in the car when you're messing with the selectors, or even just when it's sitting in the car. If you were to push this backwards and pop that Synchro out, that Synchro is gonna pop apart, and you've got a triple detent set inside there that's gonna blow apart. You're gonna have to take that rear section back off again and completely assemble the Synchro set. So what they do is they put a stopper in there so that this can't back out too far to where that can happen. So on the Tronic and the LP E-Gear Gallardos, that stopper position is different on the rear cover than on the manual cars. So when you go to put the manual forks in there, this ends up being too long, and when you go to push the cover on, it actually pushes this into reverse and forces you into reverse gear all the time. So if you even try to start the car when that condition is happening, it's just gonna throw the car backwards and you won't be able to select any other gears. So obviously that's not quite ideal. So if you just cut that shaft shorter, I just cut off 8 millimeters. That's the height difference of the stopper on the back of the cover between a manual and an E-Gear or a Tronic car. So we just cut that off, and now we are ready to start disassembly of our transmission. I like to just break them by hand and make sure that they all feel loose before I hit them with a mini impact to take them off. And these do feel tighter than usual. So I'm thinking I'm not the first person in here either. We'll see in a second though, because we know they like RT. That one has no Loctite. Look, they missed one. But this is the OEM Loctite. It's orange. It's actually not the Loctite. That is the orange is the anaerobic seal. They use anaerobic instead of RTV on these. That's how I know when I see RTV that it's someone else has been in there. We use anaerobic, but it is red. We do have to hammer. I usually go right over this. All right, we're gonna do a little bit down there. Once you get this side started, you'll do this side, and once this side starts to go, that will drop. And then obviously I'm using this tiny flathead so you can tell how little pressure I'm putting on this thing. You're just gonna wiggle this back and forth because there's dowels on both sides. You're just wiggling it off the dowel pin. You don't wanna go ham on this thing because ultimately there are gears and things inside that are resting on this, which we'll see in a second. And the less places you can touch this with the flathead, the better, because you have to clean off these surfaces and you're gonna scratch it up regardless. There's 4 indents on the nut. This is a 38 millimeter, I think, socket. We gotta press those indents out. So we're just gonna basically press those indents out. You don't wanna go too crazy on them because when you put these back on, you're basically gonna end up in the same position. See all that on there? Still a bunch on there. It's just gunk that gets packed down in there as the transmission runs, and it can magnetize to it because it creates energy, but mostly it just gets stuck in there. This part can be tricky. So this is probably the single most critical part to try to get right the first time, because as you're trying to disassemble this, these are the detents. So there's a ball and a spring set inside all 3 of these, and I assure you, if you pop them out, to put them back together. So what you want to try to do is you want to make sure this part's loose, and you want to start to try to pull that out. Sometimes they can be stiff, like this one's kind of tight, so we're just gonna gently pry. So you want to try to keep all this together so it comes off like this, and it all comes off as one piece. Now usually this race will stay on there, so you can slide the race off and put it down in here. This right here is just your roller bearing set, and then you can just set it just like that back down. We're not going to reuse this fork. We've got another fork for the manual shaft because we won't be reusing these shafts. I take out all of the O-rings. There's 3. There's 1 on this section and there's 2 on the inside section. I put everything basically in the same general area, so as I'm reassembling things, I make sure I don't miss stuff. I usually put everything in the same order as I'm taking it apart, but you definitely don't want to miss the O-ring when you're putting it back together. But the process of cleaning all this stuff, it's a lot easier not to have it in the way, basically. In fact, we're gonna go ahead and clean this before we take it apart because it's easier when it's in this position. I'm gonna start with just going over it with the razor blade. You see how thin that surface is that comes off? That's the anaerobic gasket that they put on there. And that's why they use anaerobic, because it can be that thin and create a seal. We're just taking that off. That's thick. Boy, she thick. All right, so we just got that. It's basically prepped for cleaning and then putting our sealant on it, so we don't have to do that once we take it off the car or when it goes back on. When we take this off, we're going to clean and detail the whole thing anyway, but it's a lot easier to do that part of it with it on the car. You need to check and see when you pried it. So this was our first pry mark. We need to make sure that that's level and not sticking up, which it's not. And any place that you hit with the screwdriver, you need to make sure it's not elevated because that's going to cause a problem. But easiest way to check that is when you're running over it with your blade. You can leave this side mount has to come off because it blocks this bolt. So we're going to take that off real quick. That is a 6mm Allen, unless somebody's changed it. These are the E-gear or the Artronic detents. There's 5 of these. That's the ball detent, whereas the manual, it's built into the selector itself. Since the next thing we're doing is pulling this entire housing off, we don't want these detents blocking our efforts to pull it out. Before I pull this out, a whole bunch of fluid's gonna come out. I tuck this pig mat up there, and then I set this down in front of it. So when it does start to dump fluid, it won't coat my jack. Okay. Always make sure you have 4 pins before you stop what you're doing. 2, 3. The thing about the Tronic and the E-gear systems is they really don't have any regard for the synchros. They just shove it into gear and the synchro has to do its job. So a lot of times you see premature synchro wear on E-gear cars versus a manual car. A manual car is going to last a lot longer because as a human, you're not just going to be jamming it into gear. If it doesn't go, you'll back off and try again. But they look good. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. That's the order of your synchro. It's the opposite from what you would think. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you'll notice 6 is an overdrive gear. Notice that 5 and 6, 5, this gear looks smaller than this gear. That's because this gear is bigger. So you have overdrive gears in 5 and 6. Does that make sense? So if it's not overdriven, your main gear is going to be bigger than the gear that is turning. So in this case, you have these two and these two, which are not overdriven, and then these two are overdriven because these are smaller. It looks good. I'm also checking for movement played this direction or this direction, because sometimes the nuts that secure these in place come loose, and usually it happens on this shaft and this backs out, and it's this gear that stops this gear from backing out anymore. So you'll see wear on the side of the gear if they were touching, but these all look good. All the alignments look good. It's just good. Now, before I stick these in here, I'm gonna just stick a little bit of oil inside these bushings. I knew I got it to do something, and then y'all let me just come back over here. And yeah, so I just use a little bit of grease on the shaft to, a little bit of lube helps it slide in better. Never hurt anybody. Pro tip. All right, so the reason why you have to disassemble all that stuff is because this has to be able to slide back far enough, see, for this fork to go in. So now we can slide this in, and you see our detent right here. Two detents for that fork. We'll come back to that in a second. And then this guy, same deal. Here, start with that one. There we go. Rotate it out. And then we're gonna line that up with our detent, or with our dimple for the little stud. As long as you get this close to lined up with the divot in the shaft, then the tip of the bolt will actually center it up. So it doesn't have to be exact. It'll orient itself as you get this tighter. Like right now, it can wiggle a little bit. The tighter you get, the less it can wiggle, and I can see that it's wiggling the shaft. And then one more, and it's pretty much tight. Getting these all aligned super well, because once you get, because this right here isn't gonna move that great until it has the back one that perfectly aligns with it. Same with these, it's not gonna move that great. So I just don't mess with them until I put the housing back on. All right, so 2 things. We need to clean this, do our final cleaning, which we're just gonna use alcohol, run it around this edge. I always just do one surface with the anaerobic, and I've never had any issues with it. All right, this is anaerobic gasket maker from Permatex. This is a good one. All right, so we'll start here. And one thing that I'm gonna point out is the area where the studs are, you wanna go all the way around the studs, because the shape of the inside of the housing can allow fluid to get through this part if you don't put gasket maker up here. So you need to make sure you get gasket maker all the way around the studs, because I've seen that leak that didn't get gasket maker around the top studs. It's really the top studs that are the issue. That's why when you take these apart, you'll see like a thick glob of the anaerobic around the base of these, because that's what they did at the factory. They put like an extra thick glob right there. Make sure that it sealed really well. It didn't leak. That's what we're gonna do. This does not need to be super thick. When they build airplane engines, they actually run a real thin string that basically keeps the pressure of the two surfaces from pushing too far together, so that it gives the gasket maker a place to stay without getting all squished out. So it doesn't squish out too much. You want to try to clean off your gasket maker from the edges, away from the edges. It's going to squish out either way, and that's okay. And I've never taken one of these apart and seen an issue where, the anaerobic got into the fluid or anything, or causes any major issues. But 2 exceedingly important details to factor before we mate this up. Little metal burr. O-rings. Do not forget your O-rings. Don't forget your O-rings. What are we gonna not forget? Our O-rings. We're not gonna forget our O-rings. If we forget our O-rings, we're gonna hate our lives. So I always reuse these O-rings. They're always in good shape. They always have a little crust of anaerobic, the orange anaerobic residue on them that I can just clean off, just kind of pick with my fingernail, even through my glove. It'll just pick all that off. They're always still plush and supple and totally reusable, so I just clean them off and reuse them. If you're worried about them falling out, you could use some petroleum jelly to give them a little bit of friction, but for the most part, when I stick these back into place, they stay. It's not 100% pressure fit. That one's actually pretty good. It's usually the one in the rear housing that I have an issue with, but yeah, those fit in there pretty good. We want to clean the gasket maker off of the area where the O-ring sits. It's not 100% necessary, but it'll just help preserve the O-ring in the future. And then the second thing that we need to make sure we don't forget is to clean out this section right here, like we mentioned before, and make sure that we don't have a ton of fluid leakage. And in fact, we're gonna just jack the transmission up ever so slightly to assist with our angle. This will help the fluid to go towards the back instead of the front. So now we can just clean off this whole surface, make sure it's super duper clean. There we go. Now all we have to do is stick this bag Betty back into place. All right, so as we're pushing it up, you want to just try to align the two top studs. All right, once you get the top studs aligned, we're going to be looking down here for our first shaft, then our second shaft. Then right here we have our bearings. We need to make sure all these barrels slip over and then it slips into position. Give it a little tappy tap. I already see RTV sticking out, so we're in good shape. And then these are all gonna get torqued down to 30 Newton meters. Everything on these cars is Newton meters, so 30 Newton meters. Cure time for anaerobic gasket maker is like almost instant. It's not instant, but it's almost instant. I still like to take my time and let it cure, and I almost always let it sit overnight. The order of install for the rest of these components is kind of important. We got a new fork, and we want these to go on together, which means typically I'm gonna take this plate off, and the reason for that I'll show you in a minute. Okay, what you don't want to do is push on this ring inwards from here, not from here, only from this center part. That's the only thing that you need to be pushing on to get this to go into position. Never force this stuff on. You always want to make sure that it's moving at the pace that you're trying to. This is the actual Synchro mesh ring, and that's supposed to be able to turn on this. This is a cone shape, so it's tapered. It's wider at the base than it is outside, and this is the same shape, and it's brass, and it has little holes in it for the transmission fluid to go into to modify its friction ability, and it was seized on there pretty good, so that loosening that up definitely helped. We'll put some lube on there and throw it back together, and should be fine now. So this is the ring that attaches to it, and the detents, you don't want this to blow apart. This is two sections with the detents keeping this spring tension, and there's little detent indentations in these sections of the outer Synchro ring. Lines up with these three positions on the brass Synchro ring, and so you want to make sure when you're putting them back together that those all line up and that it sits in there perfectly. Go ahead and just press that in. I've never assembled one this way before, but let's change it up a little bit. All right, we want to make sure that that lines up with that. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and stick that in position. Now, there we go. So that's what it should be able to spin freely. That probably wouldn't have been a major issue once everything went together, because the action of the shifting into that gear would have freed it up. However, we don't know that for sure. It could have been a bad issue where we couldn't get it into reverse at all, or only with the engine off and then having to try to start it with it in reverse and then use the clutch to pop it free. It's just a bunch of unnecessary steps when we can just fix it as we're putting it on, instead of causing problems that we're trying to guess at what's happening once it's all fully assembled. To do this part, I always just use my handy dandy notebook. Oh, okay, thanks. This does not have to have a major blow, so I'm going to find my singing hammer. You want quick and precise blows. You're driving these in. You don't want to just sling it and hope that it goes. You want it to be a nice, precise blow. Try not to hit your thumb because it's counterproductive and slightly painful. Unless you're into that kind of thing. Try everything once, they say, right? Maybe it's everything in moderation. I don't know. Either way, my thumb doesn't feel good. All right, now this is a by number situation, okay? If you put this one in first, there's a alignment key on this. You can only put it in one way. Not only that, but you have a washer with the orientation tab on it. So you want to just make sure it goes all the way as far back as it can go, which currently it is. When you put it in, it doesn't usually happen on the first try like that, but I'm not going to argue with it. Right now we can, this is just the idler gear. Okay, so now it's the gear dowel is lined up, but the washer alignment is not right. So we need to line it up. There we go. Now it's in. Okay, now we can put this gear back on. And the reason we have to do it by number is because this will not turn. So if we do this one first, then this one we're having to install it with it rotating, because the gears are angle cut, and as you're installing it, it's turning the orientation, so it's like a much more guessing game type of a situation. All right, so pretty much I line up where the original indentations were, usually just slightly more than that, and then hammer them in. Look for pieces that break off, because when you undo it and then redo it, it likes to have little pieces that can kind of break off, little just tiny chips of metal that will break off. So just look for that. If you have one that breaks off, it's not a big deal. Just make sure it doesn't stay inside the transmission. Almost fully assembled. Now we're going to do one last cleaning. And if you staying with us, so one thing we don't want to forget, don't forget the O-ring. Just don't do it. There's no need. I already warned you. If you're paying attention, you shouldn't forget it. If your O-ring is not plush and pliable, let me just tell you, if you want to replace it, don't worry about sourcing an OEM replacement for it. If you go to McMaster-Carr's website, they carry a whole host of these Buna, B-U-N-A, however you pronounce it, that are designed for this application. All you have to do is measure the diameters and the thickness of the O-ring, and I can guarantee you they will have whatever size you need. Last but not least, we're gonna clean out our rear cover. No, same deal. So now we're clean, so what do we not wanna forget? Our O-ring. Make sure it didn't fall out while you were sitting there. Your dog didn't come by and sniff it and knock it out, or any of a plethora of things that could happen. And don't say plethora, it's unsightly. This is a little trick I do. I'm gonna just stick this kind of where it's supposed to go, and when I go to rotate it, it's immediately gonna change positions, and that does not matter, because it'll be easier to line it up that way when you go to put this cover on than it will be to try and get it lined up the way you think it should be. 35 Newton meters for the rear cover. So if you're using an impact for this, get it just the first UGA. Don't even, no Dugas, just an UGA. There you go. That's just one UGA. Yep, that's what we're going for right there. And, oh, got a Duga on there. Oh, that's okay. All right, so almost the same as the other, but just up 5 Newton meters. Don't ask me why. Hushy. Now, just to double check, did we forget our O-ring? If the answer is yes, give up on life now. You should have listened. Is that lightning? And there we have it. That's the job. Now, every time I do this job, I let it sit overnight. And it is entirely not necessary to do that. I just do it, because the next step before I put the shifter actuator on the transmission, I fill it with fluid, and I would rather it sit overnight. Even though I'm sure it would be fine this way, most of the time that I'm finishing this job, it's between 8 and 9 o'clock at night, and I would rather just let it sit overnight. It's just the process of how I do these cars. It always falls in that kind of window. So I just let it sit overnight. If you're using anaerobic gasket maker, I would give it just maybe an hour. That's probably the most that it would need to really cure. And then you can start putting fluid back in it. But just don't forget to torque your drain bolt if you had it out, like I did, before you put fluid in it. Put the fluid in it through this hole. It's a lot faster and easier. Your fill hole, the fill overflow, is gonna be on the left side. Just take that out. When the fluid starts to come out, you know that you're full, and then you can tighten that back up. I believe all the drain bolts are 50 Newton meters. So once you get those tightened and you get these banjo bolts, I believe, are 25 Newton meters for the 22 bolts, then you can put your shift selector on after you get your fluid in it. You're ready for your linkage at that point. So